Scorpio 19, a parrot, listening then talking. One aspect of our way of communicating in society is to talk rubbish or trite, silly nonsense. We can discuss how wonderful it is for it to be sunny today instead of raining, and for it to be spring again after a winter, and we can talk about the weather, which is not nonsense, but it's pretty trite. Or we could talk about political views and sporting views that we've learned only last night on the television, and that is rubbish. But this is most of conversation. Most conversations that we have with people are at that level. And on the level of content, it's to be forgotten, really. But on the level of atmosphere and tone and just forming a rapport with another person, not based on content at all, but based on how you present yourself, not what you present, but how it comes across. Are you relaxed and easy? Are you easy to talk to? Are you easy to be with? These are the qualities that are actually most important in our interactions with people. In other words, not content, but a way of being. And the parrot is relating to another parrot in this way. They're having a chat together, and neither of them understands what's being said, and neither of them care. And that's actually what we're doing. People don't understand what's being said, not really, and they don't care, not really. They're just happy to have some company. It is the case that our species is gregarious. We like company, and in some ways, most people need company. It's a rare person that's actually taken themselves away into meditation and learn how to live alone. And most recluses that we know about are either geniuses inventing something amazing or writing a book, or they're actually depressed and lonely. And it's a rare thing for people to do without company. So we're discussing here that aspect of community involvement, just very simple, shallow level conversations, so that we can just stand in the presence of someone and get a measure of their atmosphere. And if we think about a car journey, let's talk about a long car journey when within the first hour or so you've spoken all of the words you can think of and there's nothing more to say. You just have to sit together. And in some cases that's actually very comfortable indeed. That person is okay, their atmosphere is okay for you, and you get on fine. And sitting together in silence with somebody for a very long time just really isn't a problem. But there are other people with whom we cannot find that level of rapport. And there's something about them, they irritate us or depress us. Those are the two main forces, the fiery irritation one, and the kind of watery, earthy, boring, kind of lowering our energy levels one. And these two interactions of energy are really only perceived in the atmosphere of a person rather than the content. So some people come across as really restless and constantly moving and speaking quickly, and some people are just slow, contemplative. And it's a real wind-up for a fast person to meet a slow person, and it's an irritation for a slow person to meet a fast person. It's just like, oh, calm down, I want more peace in my life, So this aspect of our beingness is something to be very mindful of. If you behave as though you were a fast and fiery person, and yet in truth you prefer yourself to be quiet and peaceful and slow to respond, well, think about that. What's moved you out of your comfort zone into a realm of being which is uncomfortable for you? It's very difficult to maintain a calm, quiet life in a busy city, for example. It is the busyness of the city makes everybody go faster. There's a lot more stress in a city life than a country life, or even a small town. Whereas in the village, in the small town, and the suburbs to some extent, you can enjoy a quietness of being. Now this deeply impacts upon the soul. This is not simply whether you're having a good time this week. This is to do with what you're doing with your soul. Is your soul actually informing your way of being? Or are you too busy to notice, too loud and fast in your way of life to listen to the soul, which can really only be heard in silence, quietness at least? That's one question. Now, we don't have a lot of choice about this parrot-like interaction if we are to form any kind of relationship with the community. The community wants us to be dumbed down to the lowest common denominator in order for it to function. The community does not aspire to excellence. It aspires to continuity, security, stability. That's why we build these rules for community. And although it's an unspoken rule, one of the rules is that you mustn't talk to strangers about intimate things. You know, you say to somebody, "How are you today?" And they're supposed to say back, "Fine, how are you?" And you're supposed to say, "Oh, I'm okay, thank you," and walk on. And that's polite. But if somebody says to you, "How are you?" and you say, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit down today because I just got a bill from the tax office," too much, too soon. You will not find rapport with anybody with that way of being, typically. It's just not what society is based on. Society is based on the fact that we talk nonsense to each other, or shallow, trivial, trite stuff, in order that everyone is safe from the risk of exposure, for example, or from emotional process, for example. That's why we do it, and it works. However, this Sabian mystery goes a little bit deeper than that. It says that the parrot-like behaviour of simply hearing something and speaking it without understanding it, this is a very useful ability. And it comes in to play especially in moments when we're channeling. Channeling often is thought to be a process whereby some spirit entity takes over a person, puts them into a trance and gets them to speak or write. Now, what I've just described is channeling, but channeling is so much wider than that. First of all, these sources of information don't have to be other people. They can be the highest level of ourselves. So in one sense, tuning into our own muse and acting out from that zone of being. That's a form of channeling. But there's also other more subtle and mystical understandings where we can channel ourselves, different versions, different levels of ourselves. And the way to do that, first of all, is to understand that for it to come through and into the world as a behaviour, as a conversation or an explanation or as written form, for it to come through that process, there must be two attitudes of mind operating simultaneously. One is openness. We have to be open to ideas and behaviours and so on that we have not encountered before. And without an open mind, that's simply not possible. We would be reluctant, we would refuse that. On the other hand, we need to not be silly. We need to have quite a disciplined approach to receiving these messages and this energy, because there is a risk of opening up to beings which are not on our side. You know, we could be possessed if we open ourselves up too much to the spirit world. And possession is a real danger for people. Not very many people, 'tis true, but for some people, they do get taken over by these ideas of spirit guides. And they certainly do get taken over by the ideas of spirit guides. Some New Age teachings, shall we call them, are simply not realistic. They're just nonsense. Or and this is most often the case, they're out of context. So some of the teachings, which are channeled teachings from higher sources, are just not measured for their reasonability. They're not checked out. And so there's quite a lot of people that believe in principles which are valid, but they believe in them as being appropriate in a different situation than their validity would allow. Let's take, for example, the idea of affirmation. This is where if you want to be something, you say, I am that thing. This is a very powerful magical tool. An affirmation does work. However, one of the key things about an affirmation is you need to be in a state of being in order to make the affirmation. You have to get into that zone of being for the affirmation to work. And that teaching is lost to most people. They don't do that because that's the tricky bit. That's the difficult bit. So, we have to be somewhat parrot-like. We have to just repeat the messages that come out of our pen or our mouth. We have to repeat that without understanding it, and later to study that. Now, in my work with the Sabian Mysteries, all that I've written on the subject was put on paper long before I understood it. I had to read this stuff and study it, and I read it again and study it again, because it came through me, not from me.